supposed to report how safe and reliable you are. So stay safe, stay reliable, yeah?
Bring Her Back is my favorite movie of 2025 so far, and possibly one of my favorite horror films ever. I saw it twice in 24 hours, and it unlocked one of the most emotional, guttural, impactful reactions in me that art has ever released in my body in my 30 years on this planet. Hey guys, it's Miya, here with Movies with Miya, and welcome back to my channel. Thank you for being here. Now, normally you guys see my face and hear me talking while you see me at the same time, but for this review, I'm actually going to try taking my face out of it because I really want the focus to be on what I'm saying, paired with the visuals, and this incredibly tragic, human, and terrifying story. Now, in typical Miya fashion, I will be reviewing this, detailing what worked for me and what didn't, and at the end, I'll give it a rating. But unlike other reviews, because this had such a massive impact on me, I'm going to add some more nuance, depth, and exploration of specific topics that I might normally glaze over a little bit in other reviews. I'm also thinking about planning a longer video about the Easter eggs and symbols from this film, kind of similar to my substance content, so stay tuned for that. Additionally, I want to note that this is a spoiler-free review. Everything I'm going to discuss can be gleaned from press photos or trailers released, but past that, we will not be discussing any major plot points, twists, or the ending. Bring Her Back is the sophomore debut of Australian twin brothers Danny and Michael Philippou, starring Academy Award-nominated actress Sally Hawkins as Laura, a foster mom who takes in orphans and siblings Andy and visually impaired Piper. And while she and the siblings process their own grief and trauma, we slowly discover that Laura is far from who she appears to be.
It does beautiful things.
You also might recognize these brothers from their first major film, Talk to Me, also an A24 film that was released in 2022 and performed exceptionally well. I personally really enjoyed Talk to Me, albeit it left me full of so much terror and dread that I haven't been able to watch it since. If only I knew how tame it was compared to Bring Her Back. Bring Her Back is bleak. It's devastating. I'd even venture to say it's hopeless. It is clear the Philippou brothers have a knack and passion for exploring grief in both their films in completely horrifying, devastating, and simultaneously emotional ways. It has really taken me by surprise a bit how this film is much more divisive in critical acclaim and reviews than Talk to Me was, so I feel like it goes without saying it is very important to note here that this is completely different in tone, style, and content, besides grief, of course, than Talk to Me. Do not go in expecting something similar. I also have to slightly fault the marketing here. Longlegs suffered this fate too. When horror films are overhyped in trailers to show only the scary parts, be called the scariest film of the year, talk about people fainting in theaters, etc., it sets a very specific and also very high expectation that many of these films won't make, and I think this kind of advertising is rather unfair. For me, Bring Her Back is a slow burn. It's horror about grief with supernatural and really terrifying elements. Because honestly, what's scarier than grief? I have yet to think of an answer. There are 6 elements at play in Bring Her Back that I think really elevate this film to an extremely high level, and we will discuss them in this order in groupings of 3. So the first 3 are the performances, the familial dynamic, and ensemble casting, and the second 3 are the use of horror as a tool, fantastic and nuanced writing, and atmosphere. Let me just start by saying, holy crap, everyone in this cast, especially considering 3 of them are children, are bringing their A game. They are fearless, committed, and heartbreaking. However, I must confess I have a huge spot in my heart for Sally Hawkins. She's one of my favorite actors. She is criminally underrated and fantastic in all she does. I think this is her first horror venture, if I'm not mistaken, and after seeing her on screen for a decade now in very heartwarming, light, funny, or maybe more dramatic, serious roles, this was a whole new level of talent and artistic excellence she's reached that I didn't even think was humanly possible.
My daughter's blind.
Oh, is she here?
Well, she's passed.
Now, Hawkins does not have social media. She struggles with health issues, she's diagnosed with lupus, and lives a very private life. So sadly, I can't find really any press on her for this film, but I hope she knows how many horror fans are absolutely gobsmacked and inspired by her performance. On paper and also in trailers, Laura should be the straightforward villain and the conflict of the story, right? But Hawkins' performance is so nuanced and so incredible that it had me weeping for her. To have such a, quote, evil character elicit so many conflicting emotions out of me, I think takes so much talent. Even if you feel like you're not totally sold on this film or you're not sure you're going to like it, I firmly believe it is worth seeing for Sally Hawkins' performance alone. It is completely committed, emotional, fearless, and passionate. Now, the three actor children that complete this ensemble, Billy Barrett, Sora Wong, and Jonah Wren Phillips, are for sure talents to watch in the future. They are all incredible, and with a special shout out to Jonah Wren Phillips, who this kid hardly has a single line of dialogue in the movie, yet he is completely and utterly terrifying. I also really appreciate that the brothers cast Sora Wong, who is visually impaired in real life, as a blind character. It is not just a checkbox for diversity or representation, which sadly I feel like is where we are headed at times with media casting marginalized groups in particular, which I don't want to undermine how great of a, positive first step that is. But then often, these marginalized groups or actors that are cast are not utilized fully to their talents and what makes them to the best degree that serves the story. Piper, who's played by Sora Wong, and her visual impairment is such a huge part of the story. The way the brothers weave it into this grief-stricken plot is emotional, haunting, and so devastating. With performances as high quality as these, I do think the slightly outdated and dry familial trauma dynamic horror trope works really well here. Also because they're not all truly blood family, and I cannot say any more past that because that'll be a spoiler, but the family dynamics here are kind of similar to Ari Aster's Hereditary, are really complicated as is, just at like a baseline level, and grief muddies this and adds so much more complexity and terror. The way the brothers managed to write all of these characters dealing with and processing grief and PTSD in completely different ways, right? While also weaving all these stories together at the same time is completely and utterly impressive to me. And it makes the slow burn nature of this film really pay off at the end. And to hit my third point, writing a story about families and familial trauma, of course, lends itself to amazing ensemble casting, which is also an element from their first film, Talk to Me. The brothers seem to carry into this film as well. Now, Sally Hawkins in marketing is sort of being portrayed as the lead, which makes a lot of sense. And while she is an absolute force in this film, transparently, all four main protagonists, her and the three child actors, receive about an equal amount of screen time, and their work with each other is very impressive and believable. In fact, there's one scene that really has stuck out to me after the two times I've seen it, where Andy and Laura are talking to each other, and all we see is them in two chairs. That's it. It's a very simple scene, but to me, it is one of the most moving scenes in the whole film, primarily in part due to Hawkins and Barrett's ensemble chemistry. It's just incredible. Yes, grief does isolate people, and that is explored in the film, but it also affects those around us, whether it's intentional or not. And I love the ensemble-centered nature of the film, allowing that to shine in the most horrifying and tragic ways. Now let's cover the last three elements that also relate to each other, similarly to these first three I discussed. Now, the writing in this film is not perfect. The writing suffers a little here and there, and a lot of people didn't like the ending and wanted more exposition on the origins of some of our major plot points. And I can totally see and understand why that may bother folks, but for me, the performances and the emotions and the story staying so present with the characters was so incredible, and so it had me so invested that the issues with the writing didn't bother me as much because that sort of overshadowed that. And what's so great about the writing that does work is that though the story has horror and supernatural elements, it feels so viscerally real. In fact, I saw someone either on Letterboxd or Reddit say this was the first film they had a panic attack in, and that, I think, really sums it up in terms of how real this all feels, even though there's elements that are obviously very fictional. So in essence, right, Laura is in this bargaining stage of her grief, and this film explores how much it will cost her if she lingers in that stage too long. Like Talk to Me, the desperation these protagonists feel, and the lengths they'll go to either soothe their grief or find a way out or find just 5 seconds of relief is really, really terrifying. Because while the brothers obviously use horror here in an artistic way to explore this is still an experience humans have in real life. We will, as humans, go to great lengths to avoid how painful something is, or bargain as much as we can to feel relief or see people that we miss, that we love. I mean, this is a very human experience. So thus, the horror is a tool here. The horror is a tool to show this. It is not for shock. It is not for the sake of being gross and disgusting, cough, Terrifier franchise, or for laughs like I just saw Final Destination Bloodlines in theaters like 2 weeks ago. I had a great time. Those are not serious films. People were laughing in Bloodlines. Horror here, though, is motivated. It's motivated by grief. It's affected by grief, or it's a result of grief. And so when horror is used as a tool that pairs with the emotional motivation of the story and what the audience feels, I think it lands in a far more impactful and really devastating and even potentially triggering way. There's one scene with Cantaloupe, oh my God, that I legit thought I was going to vomit. And this is someone who's seen all the Saw franchise, who's, seen all of Final Destination, who doesn't even blink watching The Substance. Oh, it was intense. Every time it happened in theaters so far that I've seen this film in, people have walked out. Finally, good writing and horror cannot magically work together without amazing atmosphere. Now, Talk to Me's atmosphere and the lighting and sound design and camera work I thought was really interesting and fresh, and I think that's one of the reasons it remained my favorite horror film of 2022. And the brothers, to me, really elevate this and bring her back. There's lots of themes with circles, which I can't say more on that. Even Laura's nail polish has meaning. In fact, my second viewing, I was so hyper-focused on her nail polish because it changes every scene. And the soundscape in particular was really nauseating, heartbreaking, terrifying, paired with this grief-stricken musical score. It's the perfect combo of I guess, for lack of a better term, not so feel good time. Now, between this and the soundscape of The Substance from last year, I really feel like the use of heightened sound is making a fresh resurgence in cinema, and particularly horror, and I'm elated by it. I think it really elevates a movie watching experience, especially if you go in theaters. Now, on a more personal note, when I saw this film twice in 24 hours, the first time I kind of felt more horror, disgust, and fear because I had no clue what I was walking into. Because let me tell you, the trailers spoil nothing. The second time, it was just complete grief, sorrow, and agony. Full transparency and vulnerability here. I did not drive home for 10 minutes after my second viewing because I was crying in my car. And I'm not talking like a little gentle, like delicate wiping away some tears. This was like ugly scream sob crying because I was so overwhelmed and moved by what I had just witnessed. In a world where AI, ChatGPT, and lifeless content is being cranked out faster than we can keep up, for an artistic experience to move me this way and introspectively observe my own grief and unlock this cathartic, animalistic, ruthless emotion I didn't even know I had in me is an experience I haven't felt in a very, very long time. And that is the power of art. Now, of course, I want to say that I think therapy, mental health resources, and medication are all great therapeutic tools that I personally use and love. And I always want to, tell people that those are great things to use too. And I think really, really important ones if you have access to them. But art does tap into our minds and psyches in very unique ways that I think some of those things can't. And let me just say, I think this is a movie that will stick with me the rest of my life. I don't know how many more times I'll be able to watch it because it's so fantastic, but it is so dark. But it is one of those I will take with me for the rest of my life, truly. Now, with all this being said, I also want to take a minute to give some trigger warnings for folks if you've made it this far. I'm not going to give specific details or topics because that would be a lot of spoilers, but please do research if you need to. This is a deeply disturbing film. In fact, I've seen a lot of disturbing dark media. Maybe with the exception of Requiem for a Dream, this is one of the most disturbing films I think I've ever seen. And it's not really the horror. Yeah, the horror is fantastic and the prosthetics and practical effects are incredible, but it's the grief and the emotions of it. I encourage everyone to go see it when you're feeling in like a pretty, solid, normal headspace, or with someone you love and trust, or if you're just frankly feeling up for it. If you're not feeling up for it, or if you're in kind of like a rough mental health or emotional brain space, I would maybe wait. There are scenes and images in here that will not ever leave my brain and will not ever leave other people's brains. And while I went in without too much research, I did do a little for my own personal well-being, knowing that this is going to be pretty disturbing. So, said with so much love, please proceed with caution. This is a very, very dark and honestly kind of hopeless film. Bring Her Back is 5 stars for me. Now, Sinners is a close tie to this for my favorite film of the year. I'm going to do more content on Sinners another day. Love, 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 love Sinners. But it will take a lot to top this one. As you all know, The Substance was my favorite film of 2024 and also still holds the spot as my favorite film of all time. And it's interesting because I'm sitting here thinking, Bring Her Back is now my fave so far of 2025. Of course, we're only halfway through the year, subject to change. But both sort of explore similar-ish topics in the most brutal, in-your-face way, but in completely different tones and styles. I highly recommend people go see this in theaters in particular, for the soundscape and the visuals. I just think it's completely immersive and horrifying and also kind of emotionally beautiful on the big screen. And if you've seen the film, let me know in the comments below what you think. More content on Bring Her Back, and also talk to me soon. And in the meantime, take care of yourselves. Bye, guys.
You make the most twisted stuff, but you are also the biggest teddy bears out there. I think that's true of the two of you after all these years now.
We're teddy bears, really. I wouldn't want to own that as a teddy bear. Okay.
Some people believe the spirit stays in the body for months after death. It's working! We can bring her back.